Oh, get your own. 12, just refer.
And 10, 16.
Hi guys, how you doing?
How are you doing? I'm good.
Good, thanks. I'm happy to hear that you're good. Yeah, it's Monday. It's just a Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's okay. We'll make it. So, all right, we're gonna give it one more minute, see who else jumps on. I'm expecting there to be significantly less because we've got a bunch of power outages out all around us. So, and the state's on fire again. So, per the usual.
December 18th.
Corn. 7. Limestone 14. 63.
Go. A few more jumping on. There we go. Well, thank you to Zoe and Emily and Marcy for using your videos. It's great to see your smiling faces.
Good to see yours too.
It's okay. I had one student say, "Oh, Dr. Diatley, you look tired this morning." I was like, "Man, I should really just go put on some makeup."
Oh,
so, that's okay.
We're all tired.
Yeah, it's just a Monday, so that's okay.
Yep.
All right. Oh my gosh, let me turn my phone off. We've been having evacuation updates like every 2 minutes right now.
Are you in a at-risk zone?
No. I live next to the Sacramento River, so it from either side it would have to travel pretty far to get to where we live. We've got orchards all around us, so that's the blessing in it. But like the ranch is in a evacuation warning zone, and there's several friends and family members, and I'm on the board of our church. And so our church is usually it's neighborhood church in South Chico with the big dome. And so we're usually the first evacuation center. And so if that happens, then I've got to go and help with all the evacuation stuff. So, but right now we're good. We're holding steady. So.
That's good.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I just wanted to, you guys know the drill at this point. So we're going to work through some polls, and we'll talk about some specific stuff that we went over in last week's material, which was the first part of chapter 5. And so I just want to, first of all, get a feeling of how we're doing. So here's our normal kind of check-in as far as how you're feeling with life as a student.
Can we just do it for this week?
Yeah.
Last week?
At this point right now, how about that? All right, I'll give you about 10 more seconds to do that one. And then we'll keep rolling. Awesome. Okay, so here's our results were still highly distributed on either end of the bell curve from, ugh, this is hard, but there's one person thriving this week. So just, all kinds of clapping and applause for the person that is thriving. I didn't vote. It's definitely not me. So kudos to whoever is thriving. I am impressed. So excellent. What do they call it? Is it spirit fingers? Is that what the cheerleader thing is? So spirit fingers to whoever is thriving. So, oh, that's spirit fingers, right? So, okay. Cool. That actually makes me feel a whole lot better. All right. So we'll shift gears and just talk really quickly about what is coming up this week and where we're headed. So I'm going to share my screen with you after I make sure I'm on the right page. There we go. Perfect. All right. And if you guys have anything, of course, please feel free to use the chat or just jump on and talk to me as well. So we are officially into week 6, which is crazy. October starts this week, which is my favorite month, but it definitely feels like it's flying by. School is flying by. And so this week we are in the second part of chapter 5. So I've had just a couple conversations with students about how heavy chapter 5 is, and it absolutely is. It's a really intense chapter, and that's the reason that we're taking 2 weeks to work through this material, because it's one of those foundational blocks that you guys need in order to be able to apply everything that comes after it. And so this week is the second half of endocrinology, and there's quite a bit of material, but the videos are, I believe for the most part, shorter. So I think they run between there's may have been one that was only like 5 minutes. And then there was, I think, 1 or 2 that was maybe up to 12. And so they are, there's more of them because I split them up. I wanted it to be more over a specific topic. And so so there's lots of video material to get through this week. So please make sure to do that. And then there's a whole folder of additional endocrinology resources if you need some extra things to help you understand a concept. And then this week's quiz is actually over all of chapter 5. So my suggestion would be, when you go to take this quiz, is to have your notes guides in front of you for week 5 and week 6. So all of chapter 5. And just keep in mind that that quiz is due October 2nd by 5 p.m. And I think, let me look at this real quick. Yeah, it's a little bit bigger. So there's 20 questions here, and there's a total of 41 points. So it's a little bit bigger than in the past, but that is because chapter 5 is quite a bit more intense. And so please just be aware of that as we move into the week. All right. Any questions on where we're at this week? Everybody's good with the due dates and stuff? Sweet. Okay. So I've got a couple more polls for you. And so the series of polls is going to be over last week's material in the beginning of chapter 5. Okay. And I'm going to save the last series of questions to the very end. There's actually multiple questions in it. And we're going to do that one kind of in a time situation. So I'm hoping that you guys are starting to retain some stuff about the different hormones. All right. But first, let's go to our first question here. So scrotal sweating is a reflex in response to increasing environmental temperatures in rams to help cool the testes. What reflex system does this response occur from? And we'll take just a minute to get through this. All right. 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling. Okay, so we've got a dead heat between neuroendocrine and simple neural. Okay, so let me kind of walk you through what we're talking about here. So I'm going to share the lecture with you. And we're looking at about the 5th slide there. And so let me make this a little bit, hopefully bigger. Okay, so this particular question and this action with scrotal sweating is 100% a simple neural reflex. Okay, so it's not a neuroendocrine reflex. And so the reason for that is because that stimulus of increasing environmental temperature is going to be registered by the nerve endings in the scrotal, in the scrotum. So the nerve endings there are going to be associated with those scrotal sweat glands. And so it's going to send that message up the afferent neurons to the spinal cord of the individual. And instead of being routed to the brain, it's actually going to do a quick turnaround and go from the spinal cord back out through the efferent neurons to the scrotal gland sweat cells. And that's the target tissue. And so the action is going to be the sweating action from those cells in the scrotum. And so that example is down here at the bottom of this slide. So this action of the scrotal sweat glands starting to produce sweat to help cool the testes is a simple neural reflex. All right. So let's switch gears and talk about the next question. All right, so question 3 here for you guys, or the second one relevant to the chapter 5 material, is if a piglet butts its head against a sow's mammary system in order to get milk to quote unquote let down, what reflex system is stimulated? So again, we'll take a minute here. We've got about 40 seconds left to go. All right, I'm going to end the polling in 10 seconds. All right. So we're doing a lot better on this question. So this is definitely a neuroendocrine response. And so let me take us back to the lecture here. All right, so the milk letdown response is going to be use the neural reflex plus the endocrine reflex. And so that tactile stimulation starts over here on the left-hand side with that piglet butting its head against the mammary system. And so that tactile stimulation basically wakes the nerve endings up in the mammary tissue, and that message is sent through the afferent neurons to the spinal cord. And instead of being immediately rerouted in a simple neural reflex, it actually catches a the nerve system up to the brain, and specifically here, the hypothalamus. And so that message then registers with the oxytocin neurons in the hypothalamus that are going to release oxytocin through the posterior pituitary into the blood system, which is then going to travel to the mammary gland and allow milk to be let down. And so that is a little bit of a longer reflex. So it does take a few seconds for that to happen. But this is something that we can actually train animals to. So we see this in the dairy industry all the time. So as cows like come into the milking parlor, they will go through like the sprinkler system will wash off their udders to help reduce bacterial load in the and the chances of bacteria getting into the milk. And once a dairy cow actually goes through that process a few times, they start to associate that washing response with them getting milked. And so that will help with that milk letdown process. And so this can actually be trained in individuals as well. But the answer to this question about milk letdown is that it is a neuroendocrine reflex. So how are you guys feeling with kind of the big picture of how hormones actually are upregulated through one of those two type of reflex systems? Does everybody feel pretty comfortable with it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I see some thumbs. Thank you for just saying something, Zoe. I appreciate it. All right. So Emily is asking, what is an example of both? And so there's very few examples of both, actually. So sometimes you can actually see the milk letdown situation occur, and at the same time have something else happen too. Like, let's see, let me think about this for a second. So with cattle specifically, you can see milk letdown when a calf actually bumps the bag or the udder on a cow. And so that milk letdown will sometimes also happen at the same time that sweating happens in the mammary system to deal with environmental temperatures and stuff. But they may happen at the same time, but they are on two very different systems. One's simple neural reflex, one's neuroendocrine. And so the chance of a reflex actually using both doesn't happen very often.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. All right, so let's roll to our next question. All right, this should be like an automatic reflex for you guys right now, okay? So which hormone is the king or the primary regulator of the reproductive system? All right, just a couple more seconds on that, guys. All right, we're going to go ahead and end the polling. And yeah, most of you guys are right. So the majority, which is great. So gonadotropin releasing hormone is synthesized and secreted. So it's produced and released in the hypothalamic tissue. And so it is really the regulator of reproduction, both in the male and the female. If GnRH is not produced and released, then the downstream effects can't happen. And so this really is going to start to set the tone for where we're going to in chapter 6 next week, which is all about puberty. And so that release of GnRH will actually start the process of bringing a female into a male and a female into puberty. And so GnRH is absolutely the regulator when it comes to the reproductive hormones. All right. Go back to our, okay, next question for you guys. So reproductive hormones are usually measured in the blood in what quantities? And this is a multiple choice. So if you think there's more than one answer, you can choose more than one answer. All right, about 10 more seconds, guys. All right, we're going to go ahead and end the polling. And answers here are a little bit all over the board. There's actually two answers. Hormones in the blood system, we can detect at the nanogram and the picogram levels. So usually hormones won't be secreted in any higher concentrations to be detected in the microgram, milligram, and definitely not the gram levels. The only time that we get into microgram territory is when we are dealing with a pregnant female. And that's mostly going to be on the human side. They tend to produce just more or a greater concentration of estradiol. And so, but if we are trying to do research or determine what stage of the estrus cycle a female is in, and we're taking blood samples for and testing for estradiol or progesterone or something, we're going to be measuring in the nanogram and the picogram levels. All right, so majority of you guys got those. Thank you. Let's go to our last question before our big set of questions. All right, so what characteristics do all reproductive hormones have in common? And again, this is a multiple choice answer. All right, guys, 10 more seconds. All right. So it was a bit of a trick question. It was actually all four. So hormones have the ability to act in minutes. They don't stay in the system very long, mostly because they are in that picogram and nanogram concentration. So they disappear out of the circulation really readily. They have really short half-lives for the most part. We don't want them to have long half-lives in a native system, because that means that they have a higher chance of not being regulated and something going wrong. So that half-life component is really, really important to reproductive hormones. Reproductive hormones only work because they bind their specific receptor on the target cells. So every hormone has a specific receptor. For example, GnRH's receptor is going to be on the gonadotroph cells in the anterior pituitary gland, and that cell is going to produce LH and FSH in response to GnRH coming in and binding its receptor on the cell. Okay, but LH and FSH, when they're secreted in the system and transported to the gonads, their receptors on the cells in the ovary and the testes are very different than that GnRH receptor. It's a different configuration, it's a different size protein, it's a different size hormone. And so that degree of specificity is really important when it comes to receptors. And then finally, the reproductive hormones all will regulate intracellular biochemical reactions. And they mostly do that because of the specific receptor that they're binding to. So like LH and FSH are both going to have, are going to upregulate and start the secondary messenger system with the G protein, which you'll learn about this week in the video lectures. So yes, LH and FSH will both upregulate the G protein secondary messenger system, but it's only going to do that when we need to bind LH and FSH in the receptor. And so the third and fourth choice here very much go hand in hand. And so let me just show you where that is at in the lecture from last week. So it is slide 20. And and it's just called the characteristics of reproductive hormones. So again, they all act in minutes, have very short half-lives, and they bind to specific receptors, which then allow them to regulate intercellular biochemical reactions. All right, so talk to me, guys. How are you feeling about general endocrinology right now?
Shouldn't be too bad.
Okay, shouldn't be too bad. I'll take it. I will take it. Cool. So Emily asked a question earlier. The self-study is due Friday, correct? And Emily, I think you're pulling that from the syllabus, right? I just went back and checked. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you for bringing that up. So instead of doing another self-study, which had some issues last time, I adapted all of the questions into this week's quiz. So you only have to turn in the quiz this week. You don't have to do a completely separate assignment. So no self-study is due, just the lecture quiz. So hopefully that helps you guys out. It's less to have to do. And if I'm being honest, it's less for me to grade. So, all right, cool. All right, so I want to try something. No guarantees it's going to work. I'm going to push you guys into a couple of breakout rooms and see if I can launch a poll there so you guys can go through and kind of talk about it. If that doesn't work, I will pull you all back into the main room and we'll do it the hard way, okay? All right. Stephanie, yes, I will when we come back from the breakout rooms. Okay, so here we go. Let's see if we can do this. We've got 27 of you. So let's go into 5 rooms, assign automatically, and create them. 2. It cracks me up that as soon as I say we're going to go to breakout rooms, people leave. Like they can't. I can hear when people come into the meeting and leave. Just FYI, if you guys were curious at all. Okay. So let's go options. I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes here or less. Okay. So I opened all the rooms. So if you guys will go ahead and accept those invitations to join your breakout room, I'll then see if I can launch the poll. All right, guys, sorry about that. Good intentions. I obviously need to practice my Zooming some more. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and launch this poll. I'm gonna leave it open for like a few minutes, and if you guys want to talk to each other, that is totally fine. I'm just not gonna chime in until I feel like we've got most of everybody answering all of the questions. Okay. And so you guys are free to talk to each other. I'll even get off of video so I'm not here and make it a more conducive environment to share your thoughts and feelings, but about hormones. Okay. And here we go. Okay, guys, just checking in. Most of you have responded. We're waiting on about 6 people. So if you are one of those 6 people, I am going to just give you a couple more minutes, okay? All right, guys, 30 more seconds. Okay, so let's bounce through this really quickly. All right, so GnRH is going to come from the hypothalamus. Excellent. LH is going to come from the anterior pituitary, not the posterior. So keep in mind, anterior pituitary, I need to put my video on, comes or evolves from the roof of the mouth, and posterior pituitary is going to evolve from the brain tissue. And so the posterior pituitary brings with it neurons that produce things like oxytocin. But the anterior pituitary, since it actually evolves from the roof of the mouth, it doesn't bring any neurons with it. It has specific cell types that are going to have receptors on it for GnRH. And those cell types are called gonatotrope cells. And they are going to produce things like FSH and LH. All right. So the source of FSH is the anterior pituitary, okay, not posterior. And not necessarily the uterus here. And so the source of testosterone is going to be the gonads as well, but not the uterus, not posterior pituitary or anterior or the hypothalamus. Now, what you may be getting confused on is that there are receptors in those tissues for testosterone, but that's not where testosterone is being produced. And that's what we mean by the source of the hormone. All right, so source of estrogen or estradiol, this is where you can have a couple of choices. Okay, so estradiol is going to come primarily from the gonads, but also from the placenta. Okay, so it's going to have it's going to bind to receptors in the uterus, but the uterus does not produce it. Okay, and estradiol will bind to receptors in the pituitary and the hypothalamus, but it does not produce estradiol. Keep in mind that estradiol and testosterone are both gonadal hormones, meaning that they are produced primarily from the gonad. The reason that we see estradiol also produced in the placenta is because that placenta is going to be producing a bunch of stuff that new fetus is going to need. All right, source of progesterone is in the gonads and the placenta as well. But again, progesterone is not produced in the uterus. It has receptors in the uterus because progesterone is going to come from the gonads and bind to those receptors in the uterus to help sustain a pregnancy. Okay, but it's not produced there. And similarly, progesterone has receptors in the hypothalamus, the anterior pituitary, and the uterus as well. So the answers for progesterone was the gonads and the placenta. All right, and then prostaglandin F2 alpha, that is going to come from the uterine tissue. So good job on that, guys. Not the placenta, though. All right, and then placental lactogen, name kind of gave it away. It is produced from the placenta. All right, so I feel like the majority of you guys have a good handle on that, which is great. And if you looked back at your notes, that works too, but I hope you start committing this stuff to memory because it's going to be really, really, really important as we move forward and you're put into case studies where you have to kind of describe what is happening where. All right, so I did have one request and I'm going to try this. I'm into trying things today and maybe this will be a win. But I actually have my tablet in the meeting right now too. So I'm getting to watch myself, talk to myself at the same time from two screens. It's super awkward. And so what I'm going to do is try to bring up my whiteboard on my tablet so I can write with my stylet. But I haven't done it before, so hang with me, guys. And if I lose you all, I'm sorry. We'll start next week, okay? All right, so I've got to do multiple participants. And I want to share my screen and I want to share my whiteboard. Oh, damn, this is actually going to work today. Woohoo. Okay, so I had a request to talk about the surge center and the tonic center. And so the easiest way for me to do that is to actually draw some stuff out, okay? And so no making fun of my drawings, but here we go. All right, so this area up here is the hypothalamus. And this area here is the pituitary. And if we put a split in here, this will be anterior, this will be posterior over here. All right, so if the area up here is all the pituitary or all the hypothalamus, the tonic, oh good Lord. The tonic and the surge center are going to be two different areas of the hypothalamus, okay? But we don't really know where they are. As scientists, we still have no clue. We've used a lot of technology to try to figure it out. But for simplicity's sake, we're just going to say that this area over here is the tonic center. And this area over here is the surge center. And so both of these guys have GnRH neurons in them. Okay, so GnRH is going to be produced in the cell body and is going to actually be secreted by the neuron into this third ventricle here. And so that third ventricle is then going to shuttle GnRH down into the anterior pituitary where it's going to bind to its receptor on the gonadotrope cell. And this guy is going to produce LH and FSH. All right, so what the big difference between the tonic center and the surge center is that in the female, they have both centers. Okay, so the tonic center is going to release GnRH in a trickle-like effect. So if you guys have ever had a faucet that won't stop leaking, it has that drip, 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 drip to it. That is what the tonic center is like. So it's going to continually be releasing small amounts of GnRH. The surge center, on the other hand, is going to have all these GnRH cell bodies in it. This kind of was looking like a ghost. Okay, and let me try to get a different color here. And it is going to be storing GnRH, which is shown here in red, in the axon and the dendrites in the surge center neurons. And so when a female is going through the cycle process and she is in a standing heat, what ends up happening is that estradiol is coming from the ovary and is feeding back to lots of receptors here in the hypothalamus. And it specifically is going to be feeding back to receptors in the scrotal, or no, not scrotal circumference, but in the surge center. And so when that estradiol level is high enough, it meets its threshold, what is going to then happen is we are going to see GnRH be dumped into the third ventricle, and it's all going to go down here to these gonadotrope cells, which is then going to dump LH into the system to trigger ovulation. And so the surge center is like a flood, whereas the tonic center is like a dripping faucet. So the tonic center is always going to produce GnRH just at really low levels. The surge center is going to dump a lot of GnRH into the system when right before ovulation happens. We call that part of the pre-ovulatory LH surge. And a lot of LH gets dumped into the system because a lot of GnRH got dumped into the system. Clear back up here. So Stephanie, does that help answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm sorry if that drawing is horrendous. It looks kind of like a second grader did it from this side. So I hope it made sense to you guys. All right, now I have to figure out how to stop sharing. There we go. Okay, cool. So I'm back. Awesome. Okay, well, I think that works. I just need to practice my drawing. So I'll work on that this week. I'll have to have my 6-year-old niece help me. So cool. What questions can I answer for you guys? I'm sorry we're over time already, but I'll hang out for until 1. If you guys have questions, bring them. And if not, just remember that the quiz for the all of chapter 5 is due on Friday by 5 p.m.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Bye, Zoe.
Bye. See you later.
Yeah. Okay. Hey guys, did you have any questions?
Hi, Dr. Diatley.
Hey, Olivia, how's it going?
Pretty good. I was actually the one that answered thriving, so better than usual.
Oh, there you go.
I have a question regarding internships because I'm
Yeah.
also taking a genetics class with Dr. Logan Smith